I just want y'all to listen to me a minute. When I tell you this man has written a book, has any of you read Sky Full of Elephants? Oh my gosh. Listen, I'm gonna set this up and then I'm gonna ask him questions. If you haven't read it and you do not want the story to be spoiled for you, this might not be a good place to be. Okay. The premise of this book is really, I think, the genius of this book. The premise of this book is that one day, suddenly, for some unknown reason, which we get to later in the book, all the white people just walk into the water and drown themselves. That's the premise of the book. All the white people in America.
I wish y'all could have seen their faces.
That's the premise of the book. The premise of the book is that all the white folks are gone now. And so it's like, black people, what shall you do? What shall you be? What shall become of you? And I have to tell you, when I read hand me the book out of my bag there, DJ. It may be in that back part. When I read it's on the first page. Thank you. And I have this book marked up, right? They killed themselves, all of them, all at once. You could feel their absence in everything, on the subway, in the streets, in all the places the wild reclaimed, where sunflowers grew through office buildings, et cetera, et cetera. They killed themselves. One morning, every white person in America walked into the nearest body of water and drowned. After that, I said, who the hell wrote some shit like, I said, I have got to know this man. And this is what's so crazy. So I find a way to get in touch with him. And then when I tell him, he said, oh, are you Daniel Black? And I said, bro, you've heard of me?
I literally got at least 10 Instagram clips saved on my Instagram of this man talking that I've been using as inspiration. And so didn't know you. I'm your biggest fan.
Insane.
I'm
totally insane. Fan. Totally insane. So tell us where the premise of this story comes from.
The premise of the story, it has a really interesting origin. Some of you may have heard me. Thank you. I am short. Some of you may have heard this story, but the inception point was watching Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And I know that's crazy, but if you've seen Ferris Bueller, you know it's a film about this kid who he has the audacity to look at the screen. So he's like breaking the fourth wall the whole time. He skips school, he gets his friends to skip school, he impersonates a cop, he changes his grades, he steals a Porsche, and he eventually is singing Don Cachet in a parade in the middle of Chicago. And throughout the whole film, we're rooting for his mischief. We're watching him do all of this just adventurous and wild and illegal stuff, and we want him to win. We want him to win out. And as I'm watching this movie, I have the thought, what would happen if I were to take Ferris Bueller and replace him with Trayvon Martin? And the clarity with which I knew the answer to that, to which we all know the answer to that, that movie wouldn't last 5 minutes. And I sort of entered the rest of my day going, why? Why can't I imagine this young black kid who has that audacity, who is mischievous and just living his life, having a good time, and we're rooting for him, even his mistakes. We're rooting for him to be successful. And when I tried to create that character, I applied the rules of the world as I understood it, and then the story fell apart. And so I went back to Toni Morrison, as we do, and she talked about living beyond the gaze, and I thought, well, if I'm going to get to a place where I can write that story, I need to get rid of the gaze entirely. And so I was like, off they go.
Wow, wow. The main character in this story is a gentleman named Charlie. Charlie is in jail. In fact, he's in jail on a life sentence of rape. When all the white folks walk into, it's kind of funny, when all the white folks walk into the water, either lake, river, the nearest body of water, Charlie and these other black men just walk out to jail.
They out of there. They're out of there.
Right, and I read this really metaphorically, and I wondered, are you making a commentary about the ways in which white people stand guard over black liberty, over the ways in which white supremacy, right, in its absence might equal a kind of black liberty?
Yes. So you hit on it right when you read that opening scene. So those literally the first 2 paragraphs of the book, I'm trying to reorient 3 things at once. I'm trying to reorient a sense of space.
Yes.
Which is they unseal the jails first. The jail is a physical thing, but it's also a mental one. It's an emotional one, and it's the breaking free of that space. And then we have to reorient a sense of time.
Yes.
The next thing they talk about is how people stop looking at clocks. When you ask them when the time, they just say quarter till because they're not worried about time. All they're worried about is how they're existing in the spaces in which they exist. Their bodies are not bound to work, so they're not bound to wages. They're not thinking about the ticking of time. And the last is value. Everything that we currently think of as value has to be reset. There's a line that says all of the chihuahuas in their sparkling collars are, they're ragged now. They're running in packs, scavenging, because for some reason we've held them at a higher standard of value than the people, that are working in all of the jobs that we don't want to work. And so I needed to reorient those things because white supremacy and all methods of oppression seem to lean on those things or weaponize those things against us.
Yes.
And so I thought, okay, if we can reimagine space, in the spaces in which we exist, the spaces within ourselves, we can reimagine our sense of time, which is both inclusive of the time that we have and the time that we don't have. And then we can reorient ourselves to value. What does that do for us? What does that do to the rules of this world? If I look at you and money isn't the metric by which I determine you being successful or interesting, if it's what you can give to the world, what does that mean about our relationships?
Sure.
And so it started there. It was like I want to shift that first. And does that now force anyone who reads on to read on through the lens of a whole different world?
Yes. And I have so many questions in my head. There's a whole list of questions on my computer, and I can tell as this time's going down, I'm not going to get to all of them. But one question I want to ask, once whites disappear, are blacks in heaven?
In New Orleans, they are. The saints that marched in. I think the book suggests that there's a framework around you that was built a very long time ago, and that framework is now invisible.
Right.
You don't see it anymore.
That's right.
You just
That's right.
feel it.
That's right.
And so that old Gil Scott-Heron line where he says that revolution will not be televised, the idea is it's going to happen in your mind first. And so I wanted people to have the space to imagine. Imagine there's no white people. Imagine it. And then go, well, what am I going to do? What does that make of me? What now will I do differently? And if you can't think of a single thing, if you can't think of a single thing you would do differently, or maybe you just continue on in the same method that you're on, then you've not reached revolution.
Yes.
And so I had this idea that there are cultural things that I grew up with that are not embedded in just the American psyche. Like my mom would be sitting on the porch in a rocket chair and she could feel the world intuitively. Like that's not a part of science as I understand it, but I believed it when my mom said it. And I'm like, that's cultural. I want that back in my reality. How do I find that? How do I find the origin of that? And so it became a question for me in writing the book. What things do I want to excavate out of my history culturally that I would bring forward into this new future? What things that matter to me? What is my value system that I would bring forward into this new reality if the value system that previously exists is not there anymore, right? And so it was certainly an exercise for me in trying to do that, but I wanted that exercise to be for the people who are reading.
Absolutely. One of my favorite parts of this book, you pay this unbelievable homage to the Haitian Revolution.
Oh, it has to be done.
Right. Why?
So I grew up in Panama City Beach, not too far from here. And I realized, I said this in the last talk, and I don't want to get shot, but we used to go do our Mardi Gras in Mobile because Mobile.
They're shooting.
No, right?
Sir, you're in New Orleans.
I know Mobile had the first, Mardi Gras, so I'm not trying to create no sparks, but we would often, growing up in Panama City and growing up in the South, and we had stories about culture. We had stories about Mobile and Mardi Gras. We had stories about Africatown. We had stories about Clotilda. It was mythical in our minds.
Yes.
And Haiti was as well. We knew about Toussaint growing up. He was a hero to us.
Yes.
And I will never forget, in high school, I'm in 11th grade, and we're talking about Manifest Destiny, American Manifest Destiny. And they're talking about everybody, putting on their raccoon hats and grabbing their axes and heading west and going out to actualize any identity they want. And at the same time, I'm hearing this, I'm like, yeah, but the Haitians won the war against the French, which led to the sale of Louisiana Purchase, which gave you the West.
That's correct.
So how is Toussaint not a superhero in this country?
Well,
how are we not talking about him the same way we're talking about Lois and Clark? Because
Jesus Christ.
If that didn't happen, and I need you all to hear me, because this isn't just about my book. If the Haitian Revolution had not happened, the Louisiana Purchase would not happen, and there would be no California, there would be no Texas, there would be none of that. And so we don't honor that as a part of the great American story.
Yes.
And I was writing this before all of the Haitian talk started to come up, but I'm like, for me growing up, that was a hero. It was a hero for me. It was a hero for I think we all look to try to have archetypes towards which we can grow.
Yes.
And that was an archetype, and it said you can go be whatever you want. You can defeat the army of the French and go become whatever you want to become.
Yes.
So I wanted to honor that.
Okay, very good. I read this book slowly because I really wanted to make sure I understood what was the consciousness driving this, right? And this man Charlie, when white folks moved towards the water. By the way, I have to tell you this. I wrote in my margins, right? I said, "Oh, here's what Cebo should have done right here." I said,
I want to see every single one of them.
I was like, he should have made the water beckon them because the water swallowed us. Anyway, this is my own.
I have takes on this.
But he goes to find a daughter he's never known, right? And this daughter, of course, is angry with him. She's distraught with him because she's never known him. She thought he abandoned her. Come to find out, that isn't the truth, right? But there's clearly some commentary you're saying here about fatherhood, right? And I want to, I'm asking kind of a larger question. At what point do black fathers get estranged from necessary components in the black family?
To become estranged can be, I think, for different circumstances, different reasons. But I think ultimately it isn't I think fatherhood, the prerequisite to fatherhood is the exalting the feminine in your family, right? So, and I want you to hear me. The mother gives birth to the son, right? The son is going to be oriented by his father and his mother, but she gives birth to him. If he's not honoring the person who created him, how could he possibly have a relationship with what he creates? Do you understand?
Okay.
And so I've always kind of lived in this space of, like Charlie, he needed Sydney in the book to be a mirror for him so that he could become whole as a person. He needed his daughter to do that. But he did it grappling with the relationship that gave her life, which is this woman in his life. And so I think when I think of black fathers, I think of a father having a very specific dynamic with the relationship of the feminine in his life, that he honors his mother, that he loves his wife, that he protects his sister, and that he worships his daughter. Okay. And it's a requisite for all of those dynamics to exist for that father to feel fulfilled. And I think each of those
I have so many questions about this.
I think each of those are tenuous. When you now are estranged from your children, you probably are estranged from the mother. You probably are estranged from your mother. You probably have issues with your sisters. And so I just think that the idea of being able to nurture a child into adulthood is not exclusively on the male. It is in partnership with the female, and that dynamic is foremost in achieving great relationship.
Okay. I'm gonna call you I have other questions that I want to press so hard, but my time is running down. Another question that I think is really important in this text is, of course, Charlie, this main character, and this daughter, the woman he had this daughter with is a white woman, right? So on the day that white people walk into the ocean, she goes too.
She gone, yeah.
Right.
She gone.
So this daughter, who's half black, half white, right, is left, right? And, for me, she was troublesome for me.
I get I get 2 DMs at least twice a day, and both of them are telling me how much they hate this character.
Right. She was troublesome for me. She was troublesome for me. But here's my question. It seems as if through this daughter whose mother is white, right? Well, I have to tell everyone this too. This is the only time I've ever read a book where if you have one drop of black blood, it saved you.
Yes.
Yes, right? If you had one black, you did not have to die. One drop, it saved you. I was like, oh, finally, But the thing that I think by saving this girl whose mother, and she's tethered to her mother, of course. She's tied to her mother because that's her mother, which is very, very, very understandable, right? But she finds out all kinds of things. She finds out all kinds of truth. In some ways, I wanted a kind of racial awakening in her, right? Especially concerning her blackness and her inheritance from her father, through her father, especially once she learns the truth. And I don't want to spoil the read for you, right? And I'm not sure that reckoning comes. Does it for you, or did you not want the reckoning to happen?
I think I wanted the reckoning to happen for anyone reading it. And in my mind, I've always imagined the book. If you've read the book, you know that without trying to spoil it too much, there's a signal. And the book is the signal.
Yes.
And so if you take Sydney in the context of every single other character in the story, you're watching Charlie, you're watching Zoo, you're watching the king and queen of Alabama.
Seraphim.
And Seraphim. And at a certain point, you realize that there is something that you want Sydney to have, and you don't understand why she's not accepting it. The question of what that something is the question of our times, I believe. You hear people say, you heard me say this last night, people say black is not a monolith. And I think we should be thinking monolithically. I think we should know the contours of a culture, right? So that you can arrive to the table speaking the same language, having the same value system. If you don't know the contours of that, it's very easy for it to be appropriated. It's very easy for it to be exploited. And it's easy to feel fragmented within it. And so I wanted the reader to as a result of Sydney's inability to accept it, to identify what it is you're trying to give her. Like, be clear about it. Like, is it a collection of stereotypes, or is it something more profound? Is it something more meaningful? And so I wanted that. Ultimately, at the end of the book, I get that DM a lot as well. People want to know what happened, and I think she's lying in that body of water at the end of the book, staring up at a sky full of stars, and she hears something, and it's up to us to determine what she hears.
I want her to go right on under. I did. How many of you have read it?
You know.
Well, now, I'm sure this is big. Was anybody like me? Did y'all want her to go into the water? Nobody. You did.
Yeah.
Okay. At first. Okay. I'll save it.
There's a motif in the book. If you know, you hear lavender a lot. They repeat that as a refrain. The lavender is meant to remind you to have grace, and grace in the fact that this child is 19 years old. She watched the whole family walk into a water and drown, and her sense of self walk in there with them. And she's trying to figure that out in a landscape that is too free for her. To me, it's similar to Charlie, who was in prison, and all of a sudden you're free, and he doesn't feel worthy he doesn't feel worthy to be doing the things, and he's trying to figure that out as well. And so I felt like by the end of the book, they both arrive to something meaningful.
Okay, cool. Sky full of elephants. What in the world does that mean?
There's a funny story, actually. The origin of that title came long before the book. And the story is I was in a, I guess you guys know Publix. You got Publix?
Yes.
Like those stores. I'm in a Publix, and I get this really racist thing that happens where I'm trying to check out. Someone thinks I'm stealing some stuff. And I'm with a group of friends, and I walk outside, and they're all white friends, and I'm like, yo, this thing just happened to me where, I'm being profiled, and I'm obsessed. So I'm like, it always happens to black people. And it's fascinating because the people I were with, they're from Wisconsin. And one of the girls looked at me and she goes, could you just be making that up? And I was like, well, why in the world would I make that up?
Wow.
And she goes, well, I just feel like, black people are always talking about things that happen to them. Maybe you're just picking up on that.
Oh.
And I had to unfurl my fist, y'all. Like, it was crazy. And so I said, it's like I'm trying to tell you that the sky is full of elephants, and I can see the elephants and you can't. And I said that to her, and it stayed in my mind. And when I started to write the book, the image of the elephant, to me, it conjured so much important stuff. It conjured the heaviness. It conjured the memory. It conjured the continent. It conjured something that is obstructing your view, that you can't get access to it. For me, it was a lot. And then the idea that all of that is hovering above us at all times. And it could come crashing down at any moment.
Yes,
sir.
And yes, sir.
And so I thought, I live my life thinking about Africa once a day. And I've never been to the continent myself. I think about it once a day where I'm like, wow, I wonder what that would be like. I wonder where my folks came from, right? I wonder, and I have friends who you can ask them, where they come from. They could tell you 10 generations all the way back, and they've got a crest for their family, and I don't have any of that. And that feels like something hovering above me that I don't have access to, that it's up to me. And I can only see it and they can't, And so it came out of that, and I thought when people read it, they won't know what it means, but they will have that, they'll conjure that image of that elephant, and they'll have a curiosity just like I did.
Gotcha. I guess you have a literary agent. Is your agent white?
He is, pristine.
Okay.
He's
And I'm wondering, what the hell did he say when you sent this manuscript in?
It was funny. He was like, I've written.
You trying to kill me, bro? No, I'm just kidding.
He's like, I gave him a whole bunch of short stories, and it was in one of the short stories. I don't think he read it, to be honest. I think he read like a couple of the other ones. He was like, I'm gonna send this out. And what happened is all the publishers, they went, if this one story, if you turn this into a novel, I'll buy it. And that's when I think he realized what it was.
Wow.
But this is the funny story. Is at the time I also had managers. I don't have managers now, but I had them then. And my manager, I gave him a copy of the manuscript, and he reads it, and he goes, can we get on a call tonight? And I'm like, yeah, let's get on a call. And he's got him and like 3 other people on this call, and they're like, everyone's on it. And he's like, Cebo, I love the book, I love the writing, but I kept getting thrown out of it because I couldn't see myself in it. And I was
Yes, you could.
I was like, you're under the water.
Okay.
I'm confused. I'm very confused. What part of you did you want to see?
Right.
And what he said to me, I think about it all the time because I'm just like, wow, I don't think I've ever heard anyone say this. He went, but I'm Jewish.
Okay.
And I was like, does that mean you're not white? Because I'm not sure. I personally don't know. And when I wrote the book, I was like, yeah, you're definitely under the water. Yes. But then as I've as it's been, out in the world and I've traveled more and more, I'm like, this is a very American story. And in America, the same way they make all black people black, they make all white people white. And so, yeah, you're definitely dead. You're swimming. But it was interesting to hear him talk about it from that lens, because he goes, I don't see myself. And I went, you know how many books I've read in my life where there's a Middle Earth with hobbits and there are no black people, right? That's the sensation I get all the time. Now, fast forward, this is literally 2 weeks ago. I'm doing a book conversation. It's a room like this. It's filled with people. There's a sort of a nave, if you will, where people can walk down and ask questions. I finish the talk. Woman walks down, this older lady. Everybody's looking at her. She's an older white lady. She comes to the microphone and she goes, I was so angry with your book.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, talk me through it. And she went, I felt like I was the other on every single page of this book. And if that's how I or any of my people made you feel, then I'm angry. And I was like, that's where we want to be. That's where we want to be.
Did you tell her she was under the water?
Yes, she was dead. Like, there's no question. No question.
I'm just kidding. There's a fascinating aspect of this novel where there is this machine, right? And this machine seems able to, what's the word I want? I'm going to say conjure. That's the word I'm going to
I think that's appropriate.
Okay? Black consciousness, right? And you mentioned black consciousness and it takes me back, of course, to the 60s, right? In terms of this notion of consciousness and what, right? Can you put, I'm going to put some parameters on you. Can you put in one sentence what black consciousness is?
It is the simultaneity of inclusion and expression all at once, which is to say, it is a power that is in a constant state of welcoming everyone as a way to create something new always. I think that's what it is. Wow. And I see it every time I sit and I listen to, like, you could put on a Miles Davis record right now and every single one of us is gonna feel that same energy. Yeah. You know, and at the same time you could go sit at a dinner table of one of these ladies here and feel utterly welcomed. And I think that's what it is. And it's a state of abundance that from which it feels like the world is just trying to grab everything out of, and it just keeps replenishing itself at its own expense. And so, you know, it's that, and I don't think we can navigate away from that nature because that's who we are, and I think that's the consciousness that connects us.
Yes, sir. Awesome.
I just made that up, by the way.
No, that was brilliant.
I was winging that.
Awesome. If you had to name 5 writers who have really transformed you literarily, who would they be?
Well, the first is obviously Toni Morrison. The first time I read Sula, it took me 6 months because I just kept closing the book because I couldn't believe what I was reading. I was like, no one should be able to do this, but this is extraordinary. I would definitely say Baldwin as well, but for different reasons. I think literature aside, I felt like he was able to capture something that it was like a space that he held for me that I loved to be in. I'm going to throw one at you that is a bit unexpected, but Neil Gaiman. I remember I'm not surprised. I remember being young and reading Neverwhere, and it's like a fantasy kind of book about underground London. And I've never been to London, but I can suddenly imagine it fully and imagine a version of it that doesn't exist simultaneously. And I was like, this is cool. And so I always really liked what he could do with language, and I liked the way he was able to construct stories that matter. Chinua Achebe, because that for me was my pathway back to history, and I could access stuff that you know had impact on me beyond just what was on the page. And then I would say I got to give shout out to Nikki, Nikki Giovanni, because she showed me what love means through her work, and that it wasn't passion exclusively in its creation, but passion in the way it was received. And so I thought I've always found her work to feel like more than just its words.
Awesome. I have 17 more questions. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to get 3. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to get these 3 in. What is your writing discipline? What's your writing process? Like, do you write every day?
I do write every day, but I try to balance input and output, and so I'm all about trying to live a life where I can get inputs. I go to the movies. I have like multiple memberships at movie theaters. I got multiple memberships at.
You just love movies.
I love movies. I love theater. I love to go sit, and I'll go just. I don't even like what I'm seeing, and I'll just go to sit in it and just receive it. I've membership at like museums all over New York, BAM, at because I want to receive information as much as I'm outputting it.
Sure.
But my process of writing is, I am a creative director in my day job. I have an agency that I run in New York, And I was a designer for many years. I was doing work where I'm building brands. So I approach writing in a very similar way. And what I do is I build myself a sandbox that I could play in. And what that looks like is when I have an idea for a story, and I did it with this one, I'll write one sentence for every chapter until I get to the end. And it's literally just like this happens, and then this happens, and maybe this happens, until I get to the end. And it's like I can see the parameters of the full story. And then I'll at that time I'll have some anecdotes that I like or things that I think it'll be interesting on the page, and I'll just start throwing those on the wall. And then I'll grab photos of stuff. So I have pictures of people that represent Charlie. I have pictures of places, and I'll throw those on the wall. And I've got a sort of hodgepodge of ideas. And then I'll start to organize those so that like the anecdotes are paired up with some of the things. And then I also, because I'm a designer, I think spatially. And you guys know what this feels like. If you ever walk into like a lobby, you know exactly where they want you to take your Instagram because they've designed it to look really beautiful, and you sit down and you want to take your photo. You could do that in books. You could do that in movies. In movies, those are called set pieces. And so in a book, I know that this scene people are going to really react to, and I know that this line might be something that will be quoted in a magazine. And I'll have those anecdotally as well, and I'll sort of organize it. And then once that organization is done, I won't look at it anymore. I'll just go write. And then I can play with language. And I don't have to worry about the trajectory. I don't have to worry about whether I'm going to lose the track of the arc of the characters. I already got that. I can just worry about whether the language is resonating or not.
Okay. We artists are ever editing, right? What is something, it's a daring question. What is something you would change about this novel now if you could?
Yeah, all the white people live.
Ah!
None of them live. No, I'm kidding. I think what I would change, that's an interesting question. Because I don't think I would actually change anything.
Okay.
So I have this phone, right? I got my iPhone. But when I live in the UK, when I'm in the UK, I don't use this phone. I have another phone. It's like what you would call a dummy phone. Because I'm interested in a thing being what it is, when it is, and that's it. Like I don't need it to live on. I don't need it to be different. I need it to be, and that's it. And so I feel that way with art. Like you create something, and you consolidate all time that you've spent on this earth. You consolidate the moment in which you're into that piece of work, and then you move on to the next one. And it contains all of that. And so going backwards and trying to change it, or even thinking in those terms, I think turns your head this way instead of that way. And I want to keep my head that way. And so when I wrote the last sentence, and frankly, I just finished my new novel 2 days ago.
Oh, wow.
So I literally wrote the last sentence.
Can we get the title?
I will give you the title. The title is called Wells Without Water.
Wow.
And that title is based on a Bible verse. If you go find a Bible verse, I will not tell you what it is. You'll know what the story is about. And so, but I wrote the last sentence of it 2 days ago. And I write it and I go, great. I'll come back to this in a couple of days and I'll do some edits. But I'm not going to change it dramatically from what I wanted. It's going to stay pretty consistent because I think, we're working in a space. We're working in a space and time, and I want that to be stapled to the work.
Okay.
And so I don't know if I would go back and change it. There's this other thing. It's a bit deeper, but in the book there's a lot of this dynamic with relationships, right? It's a relationship with Charlie and his daughter. It's a relationship with Sailor and Zoo, the king and the queen. But there's this larger arc that I was trying to explore, which is the relationship between whether or not our lives are meant to solve the sins of our ancestors. Right? Are we living to be absolution for what has happened before? And in that way, the young are healing the old, not the old healing the young,
right?
Which happens in the book. Sydney is trying to heal Charlie. Zoo is healing Sailor. The children, Nona is given the mantle to heal everybody, right? And I sort of operate in that way in life where I'm like, I look backwards only for orientation. I look forward because I know all that's on my back to solve, and all that's on my back to help figure out and help make better anything that people has been through. And so I think ancestrally the past lingers, it haunts, and all of that. And I want to be active in its evolution and its change. And I think that way about anything I create. I want to be active in the next thing. I want to be active in the next thing.
I can hear that. I can hear that. You really clown Alabama in this.
I loved Alabama.
No, you didn't. Charlie, of course, is in Chicago.
He's in Chi-Town.
Right? So they're basically in the north when the event happened.
Actually, he is up at D.C. and then they go to
DC,
Chicago.
that's right. But in order for them to get to kind of the land of black salvation, right?
Which is what we call Alabama.
They had to travel south. But there's so many, what's the word I want to say? You clown Alabama so bad. Why you clown Alabama like that?
It was nice to Alabama. The place that I was tough with, I think, was Mississippi. But
No.
I showed love that.
You clowned Alabama.
I grew up around Alabama, and it's deserving of a little clowning. But what I think, and this is heavier than I just think, there's a line in the book that says, everything that America wants to forget flows down its rivers to get caught eventually in the Mississippi Delta. And the idea is the South captures all this stuff and it holds it. It's the skeleton closet of this country. And no better places there than Alabama and Mississippi as a relationship. And so I wanted to acknowledge that. Not I don't want to clown it, but I want to acknowledge it. And then I wanted to create within it what feels like Wakanda. Right? All of that pain, all of that terror, and you arrive to it and you go, wait a minute. In part because I think that's what it is. I think if you go to Mississippi, there's a poll that went out many years ago, and what it said was they took the country and it took different states, and it said based on the median income, the lowest state would have the lowest average IQ.
Okay.
And they did it, and they showed that it was Mississippi, and they said Mississippi has the lowest average income and it has the lowest IQ. Number 3 was Alabama. And I was like, what are they using to determine intellect, to determine one's IQ, and what are they using to determine value?
Sure.
Because as I understand it, those people are intelligent in ways that I can't comprehend. Those are the ones that are sitting on the porch with intuition, right?
Right.
And they have value in ways that I can't comprehend.
Sure.
I work in the luxury space.
Sure.
I know for a fact that if you go and you stay at a Mon and you pay $5,000 a night for a hotel, they're going to offer you 2 things. They're going to offer you time, and they're going to offer you nature. They're going to say, we're going to take care of everything. Don't worry about it. All you got to do is sit your stuff down, and you'll have everything you need. We'll take care of everything. So giving your time back, and they'll give you a view of a mountain. They'll give you a view of the ocean, and you have your moment to sit and be reflective in nature. That's the most valuable thing they can offer you. That's what they're doing in Alabama right now. Right now, they're sitting on porches, eating pecans, looking at the distance. Is it pecans? I'm not sure. I can never know. And so that to me is extraordinary value. And there's an intellect that is beyond what someone can quantify in numbers.
Yes.
And so in that way, I wanted to eventually honor the South. It had to go through something. Like I had to, call it out, but eventually I wanted to honor it.
There's one other thing you clown too, which I think is magnificent. And that is Christianity.
Oh my gosh. They gotta have it too. They gotta have it.
Because this aunt Agnes wore me out. I would say, what in the world is wrong with this woman?
Right.
But and then of course, one would have to know a little. There's a little Vodun in this text.
Interesting.
Poppy Legba, and yeah.
It had to exist in there because I'm of this belief. This is true for Christianity as well. Do you guys know what a Santeria is? These women?
Yes.
They're sort of combining.
Sir, you're in New Orleans.
I know. I thought I was in Chicago. They're combining sort of religion, history, artifacts.
Absolutely.
And they use something called sympathetic magic, which is that they can influence the spirit by way of mantles and by way of totems and things like that, which is counter to traditional Christian ways. And so I wanted to do something like that where it felt like you're merging a bunch of stuff into one. So you get the Papa Legba, but you also get, a sense of what Christianity means, or at least spirituality in that context. And then it extracts from it all of that stuff that you saw the aunt doing and whatever everybody else was doing in the revival in Alabama. It extracts that as separate from a gathering around the Spirit.
Sure. Our time is going to run out in a second. I see the yellow light flashing. This always is helpful. There are burgeoning writers all throughout this audience, right? Some famous, some not so famous. Some who've probably written manuscripts or on their way to writing manuscripts. I'm thinking about writing a manuscript. Somebody? Sure. Your advice to them?
Have courage. Have courage. The only thing that differentiates someone who is thinking about doing something from someone who has done something is courage. Go make it happen. The page is blank, and you have to activate it. You have to break that inertia and go make it happen. I've spent my life moving through different creative mediums, and at no point did I ever feel fear that I didn't understand it, fear that I wasn't good enough.
Wow.
Fear that even that anybody else would absorb it. So that's advice number one. And number two is, I don't think any other writer is going to tell you this, but don't think of yourself as a writer. Either think of yourself as an artist or a storyteller. And
distinguish those for us.
So a storyteller is someone who, by definition, is creating something for other people to observe and for other people to hear. If you're sitting in a room telling stories to yourself, you're not telling stories, right? You have to be able to engage an audience and tell them the story. And so you always have your eye on the people around you.
Okay.
And the artist is someone who believes that they can make something out of nothing, that you can pull it out of thin air, that it cannot exist in this world and you can make it in this world. The two of those things, when you combine them, I think that's when we get the most profound pieces of work.
So what's the writer?
I think the writer is the craft. It's like the doing it every day. It's like it's the person that can go into the kitchen and make something completely new, or the person that's following a recipe. And you can follow a recipe, but you can also deviate from that recipe and become an artist again.
Sure.
And so
Sure.
I think that, like, I struggle when people ask, when they refer to me as a writer, because, I tell stories in every possible way that I can, and I'm not limited to the medium. I would also say this, if you are thinking of yourself as a writer, it inevitably becomes artistic in that the writer does not have any tools. And so if you are a painter, you got your brush. If you are a photographer, you have your camera. The writer has to make his own clay, and that's your first draft. And so you got to make it. If you don't go and make the clay, you can't possibly get into the act of refining that into a piece of work. And so it returns to the first point, which is to have courage. Go make the clay. Go create the thing, and then you can refine it into what is the craft of writing. But and I had this earlier today in the panel I had before. They asked me about what did I ever think I would be standing in front of people talking about book, and I was like, yeah, because I tell stories. My expectation was that someone is listening to the story that I'm telling them, and I think that gives you a power that you don't have if you just think of yourself as writing in isolation and then being afraid that no one wants to read it. You're assuming that people will, because that's the whole point.
Right. I think I can sneak in one other question.
Bring it on.
And that is, every writer I've ever met, you're not a writer. Every storyteller
I'm just out here.
that I've ever met, most artists do more than one medium.
Yes.
Right? So other than writing, right, what other artistic thing do you do?
God, I do so much. I know that sounds crazy. There's a lot of stuff that I'm doing that I don't do sing?
Well.
I cannot sing. I can play guitar.
Okay.
So if you got a voice, I got you. I'll put a track on you. So I grew up as a sketch artist, and I really, really like drawing. I used to draw comic books. I used to tell all my stories that way. But I went to school to do film. So I went to school. My school was weird. I went on a football scholarship. So I really went there to score touchdowns. But when I got there, I was writing, and my teacher liked to work, and so she moved my major, and she goes, well, what do you want to do? And I was like, well, I guess, film sounds interesting. Let's do that. but they didn't have a film degree. And so they did a contract degree for me where they gave me a significant amount of literature courses, a significant amount of communications courses, and then theater courses. Now, I'd never done theater, didn't know anything about it. And I'm taking literature, I love it. Communications, I was learning design and stuff, which eventually translated. And I'm in these theater classes struggling. Like, I'm a terrible actor. I could never do it. But I really like directing. I really like writing for the stage. And so that became a medium for me to tell stories as well, is directing and getting back to film eventually. So I work on all those things. And then I know this sounds crazy, but I'm also a dad, which has, you got to have some artistry in that. And I'm a dad of 3 daughters.
Yes.
I'm working.
So you
hard.
do hair.
I do, right? Don't play with me. I might start charges. But,
You all, Cebo Campbell. Give him a hand. Give him a hand. Give him a hand.